Welcome to a new episode of Becoming a Post-Growth Planner, Obstacles and Challenges to Changing Roles and Practices. My name is Christian Lamker, Assistant Professor at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And for today's episodes, we are towards the end of April 2026. I'm very happy to talk with Julia Grosinger. We have been in contact for quite a while, and you can share and will share some post-growth experiences from the Alps towards other countries, towards Spain. And we'll get there in the next 20-25 minutes.
Many thanks, Christian, for the invitation. I really enjoy your very short espresso podcast. I think I listened to all of them in the last weeks, to be honest. Yes, just to word of warning, I'm not an urban planner, but I'm coming from the field of social ecology. And today, like these days, I like to describe myself as a human geographer. And so I still feel a little bit exotic in the domain of planning, but I work on a quality of life in relation to the environmental spatial conditions, and mostly with participatory, transdisciplinary methods with local populations in rural areas. I think here we can align probably with some planning practices. Currently, I've been finishing a postdoc at ICTA, University Autónoma de Barcelona, where I worked in the last years on spatializing degrowth in rural areas based on a case study. And I started, as a social ecologist, I started to work in rural areas, mostly in agricultural systems. But then I had, when working a lot in Europe, I became also aware that there is more than like sheep and cheese production.
Yeah.
But you have also like very different and very diverse rural landscapes. For example, I work in a post-industrial landscape in Catalonia. Also, like there are these abandoned landscapes in Eastern Europe, or like these very protected landscapes in Italy.
Your life and career it has taken you really into multiple places, in Italy, in France, in Austria, in the Netherlands, now in Spain. How and where has it taken you really into degrowth, post-growth thinking? Or what has also been the role of these different, your own places in that trajectory?
I mean, first of all, I think there is a very pragmatic reason, like the current biophysical conditions we have, like they just don't allow for an endless growth system. Yeah, because I've been always working in sustainability and like sustainability industry for almost like 15 years now. And my aim was always to find non-monetary indicators for a good quality of life. But at one point of time, I also realized, like, if you just replace this one indicator with another, but without questioning the entire structure, like society is subsisting in, then you just end up as this another shiny accessory in this in a very greenwashed system. So I thought also there is more to it, and also like how a good quality of life is perceived in a growth economy. It's mostly about happiness, well-being, fun. And in degrowth, there is a bit more to it, like this instant gratification. So, and this, what is more to life is also linked to local places and places in a relational context now. So I was interested in that, like what makes life a bit more meaningful.
Yeah, and we have a rare opportunity today to talk especially also about rural areas, about mountain regions. So both contexts that are not usually the core of post-growth and degrowth studies so far. And we often tend to start thinking from cities, where some of the problems like housing are also much more immediately visible. But why should we also, or even equally, emphasize rural areas and also talk about them?
Yeah, I think like I agree with most urban planners, like that you cannot think degrowth in this isolated spatial term of a city. Like we saw it also with it's not urban, planetary urbanization. And also like the concept of bioregions, like they all touch upon that already. So we need to also like include the larger spatial scale. A very easy reason is also like that rural areas cover 80% of European surfaces. Also at the global scale, it probably has the same percentage. They are like the backbone of human survival. Like we have all ecosystem service functions there. We have all resources there, biodiversity. So we need to include these areas. And another reason which I came across in the last years is that if you look at at Europe's demographic development in the last 50 to 60 years, you do have like this very steady demographic decline in rural areas. And at the same time, you have all these different territorial cohesion projects, the development projects, revitalization, smart city, smart village approaches, and all of them, not all of them, but they have a very limited success. Like you cannot stop this demographic decline. So I thought like this post-growth perspective also brings a new perspective into these rural areas. And this is more personal reasons for me now. Like I was quite surprised when I came to post-growth and degrowth research that there were these very two distinct running narratives on rural areas. Like you have this very utopian vision of rural areas. We just need to stop living in a city, go back to the countryside, living off the land, and everything will be fine. Like you have the very utopian, ideal Jean-Jacques Rousseau style. And on the other side, like other urban planners or degrowth, which is quite urban based or urban centric, consider also these places as an annex, like the places that don't matter really, the places that are a little bit left behind, and where these two different life worlds don't really intercross. And in this discussion, like when you talk about the city, always the growth machine, you also forget that also growth happens in rural areas, that it looks very different.
But how does it look like? So not only urban areas, but then also rural areas are affected in growth dynamics, if I understand you correctly. How do these growth dynamics then show up in rural areas in the countryside, or to what extent are they then different?
Like my argument is mostly that we have different forms of growth. I'm generalizing now a little bit because I don't know too much about urban degrowth, but in urban degrowth studies, you focus a lot on rent extraction and on housing policies. And I argue that in rural areas, you have other extractivist practices like agro-industry, tourism, large-scale energy projects, where the power of decision usually is unequally distributed and also frequently at another place, like it's dislocated. So you have like this gap between production and consumption. And besides this extractivism, you also have this land abandonment, which is very counterintuitive, but is also a part of economic growth. When we talk about this demographic decline before. And moreover, in some parts, like especially in countries with very high life standard, let's say the Netherlands, the UK, and France, you see a back to the land movement at the moment, which some people like to call like rural gentrification, New Highlanders, néo-rural, in French you say that. So this is also an effect of growth. And moreover, like these people are confronted with this growth impact, like many of them where you don't really have a control what happens in these areas. And at the same time, you have much less access to social services, public cultural services, health services. Everything is very far away. So you have like the worst of two worlds, basically. And then there is also this general misunderstanding, like a lot of environmental policies seem to be thought without rural areas. So we have seen a lot of backlashes in the last years in rural areas. If you remember probably the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest movement in France, which was against the rising carbon tax, resistance against restoration projects, resistance against large energy projects. Like I do think we need to also look more explicitly like what happens to these rural areas.
Yeah, I would like to move on a bit to the underlying question about human needs that underlie degrowth, post-growth, both in rural and urban contexts. And you've recently been involved in a paper, Loved Keystone Places, Spatializing Fundamental Human Needs for Post-Growth Strategies in Rural Areas, together with Angelos Vavarousis and Georgios Kallis, published now in 2026. I would say it's regularly straightforward to speak of fundamental human needs. We can do that easily, but then not equally easy to clarify, delineate what does that actually mean in different contexts. So what was your approach then in that paper? What did you do there?
So my idea has been to what extent like the social spatial environment contributes to a good quality of life. I asked in a rural town in northern Catalonia different people to walk me to their favorite places and to see like how it contributes to their basic human needs. And why I did it, it's because in many studies, like environmental quality is integrated to measure good quality of life. Sometimes you use the indicator like the accessibility of green spaces or cultural spaces or proximity. If you think about the 15-minute city or something, like people do consider like spatial surrounding is important for a good quality of life. There lacks a little bit the integration of these personal, very unique places, which generate this sense of belonging or the sense of place or this other deep emotional attachment. So I was interested to work on that.
Yeah, in that paper, you also employed the human scale development metrics of Manfred Max Neef. Say it's certainly less known to everyone who listens to us now. So what does this approach do and what makes it then relevant for post-growth?
Manfred Max Neef is, I've been coming back to him over the years quite frequently. For the people who don't know him, he was one of the leading figures in alternative development economics of the 1980s, together with Amartya Sen. He was also working against the background of the structural adjustment programs and the Human Development Index and what makes a good quality of life, how many years do people need to go in school, how much is the caloric input and everything. Which makes sense probably at the global scale, but at the local scale, he asked himself like what really contributes to a good quality of life. And he defined 9 needs which humans need to fulfill, to have fulfilled to be satisfied in their life. And there is, for example, I don't count all of them now, but there is the need to be loved, the need to participate in a society, the need to be creative, the need to feel free. And how people fulfill these needs depends very much on themselves, but also on the context. Like, how do you create a secure environment? Like, do you establish good relations with your neighbor, or are you preferring military armament? Like, it depends very much. Like, this is also how society is shaped. And he worked on the local scale, which I found fascinating. And it was by default, it's a post-growth approach of a good quality of life. And in my interviews, I asked the people for their favorite places, and we walked there, or I got them drawn by the children. And then we looked at the matrix of Max Neef and say, okay, to what extent does this place fulfill which need? Do you feel free here? Does it respond to realize your feeling of identity or belonging? So that was what I did.
Yeah, the article titles Loved Keystone Places. What are these places? Do you have examples of how can we imagine these places that you found and what makes them so beloved? Or maybe also for whom?
Yes, I mean, I got shown about 100 different places, but you saw like some of them were frequently repeated. Like one of my favorite places was a riverbank, a deserted riverbank, a little bit difficult to access, where a lot of young people between 15 and 25 hang out at night. And I found it interesting because it was also a little bit outside of the city, outside of the control, outside of authority. It was at this fuzzy edge of planning, which I found interesting. Other places were the historical church square, where a lot of elderly people like to meet up on the morning and chat. So, and I dubbed them loved keystone places. First of all, because it's a concept of ecology. You have the keystone species approach, which describes a species that is crucial for the functioning of an ecosystem. For example, a beaver. If you remove a beaver out of the ecosystem, there will be no dams anymore. The ecosystem will change. And I assumed it would happen the same with the space, with the place. And loved I used because I wanted to refer to this very individual and very irrational emotion that you can, which is difficult to describe to other persons. So, like these loved keystone spaces, they combine like this very rational, homogenized, standardized approach of keystone species with very authentic irrationality of love.
Yes, it's sometimes even the unplanned spaces, somewhere the riverbank that was probably not part of any planning strategy of being a meeting place for a certain group of young people.
Exactly.
And with that research, I mean, you clearly uncover that spatial aspects are relevant. I quote from your article, for people's needs for identity, leisure, and participation. What are then the implications for, if you think further to local planning strategies from such a, you call it, place-sensitive, needs-based, and intuitive framework? Or more particular, if you think of a local planner, what could she or he consider in regular practices then?
I mean, what I really like about this human scale development matrix, it's a very long term, but it's very intuitive, and people, it's a very accessible tool to make, to communicate with people. Like, I think it could be integrated as an early stage planning tool. For planners, as you already hinted, like, I found it interesting how these no man's land zones, like these fuzzy edges where no planner is actually involved in, are really important for some people. And it's also important to think from a planner's perspective, also, like, to leave some zones just wild and let's see what happens, especially in rural zones where you have like a lot of fuzzy edges, but they're all used in a way what is not expected. I mean, there is also like some sort of, there is a performative aspect in it, I think, like that you engage people with a participatory tool is also important to make them heard. So, yeah, and for planners, it would be like the most straightforward is probably like to integrate like these little patches, maybe in land use planning, like to limit an identification or to restrict or protect certain areas, which are not per se like seen as aesthetic or appealing or important.
Cool. Yeah, in a moment, I would like to reflect a bit also on the methods that you used that were interesting and important in themselves. But one question out of curiosity before, because I read in the article, you state that you deliberately did not use any generative artificial intelligence for writing. And as we talk about communication, human needs, do you recognize tensions when speaking about human needs, even desires, when we have some way of technology, artificial intelligence in the loop?
I remember it was so strange when I had to write this statement because I felt very, very, very mechanistic, very robotic. Like, I have to prove now that I'm a human. Like, so I believe probably there will be some value of these LLMs in the next years. However, I think for me, for my research, it was a very crucial moment because like they got launched during my research, which kind of comforted me in my way of working, like really privileging participatory offline encounters of people, like engaging societies directly. And I think like this engagement with local population is not like this one thing you need to tick off the list, but it will be clearly become part of our work.
Yeah, and you have used the right repertoire of research methods, art-based research, walking interviews, you mentioned them already. Why is it so important for you to use such versatile repertoire of methods to work with post-growth?
Yeah, because the idea is also like to integrate as many people as possible into these approaches on how to envision, how do you see the future? And like in this traditional interview setting, it's there's always a little bit of a strange power dynamic between the interview person and the interviewer. And there is a question, answer, and the person usually tries to comfort you and say things you want to hear. And I was very inspired by Francesco Carrieri, which is an urban planner who is a big proponent of walking tours. And so it was for me also easier because people, when they walk, when you walk with people, there are less bias, there are less power dynamics. And also you have more natural engagement with your environment. And also like the idea is also for children or elderly people who cannot walk or who the parents won't allow me to walk with them because children have a very limited freedom in today's society. I think but they also should be part of a planning process. So for me, it was painting was very important, like drawing workshops in a school with elderly people. I had it felt almost like time travel, like collecting oral histories of their memories. So I think it's because post-growth planning, it's not happening on the grid. It's something which happens in the mindset of people. Right? So.
Yeah, before our talk today, I read into some of your previous works, and then I stumbled upon your contribution to the Degrowth conference in Zagreb in 2023. And I read there that your aim was, I quote again, to reveal actors' unconscious perceptions of their physical environment and ultimately their idea of what a good society is. Can you enlighten us a bit? What are such unconscious perceptions, or what is or could the good society then be?
Yeah, I wrote this actually before I started my research. And I had not found the appropriate concept at this point of time when referring to the subconscious perception. I think today, like I came across a book which is called Affect Theory. So it's very much that you work with these irrational sensations and emotion without, you feel them before you name them, especially for spatial planning. You go into a room and it has a spooky atmosphere, or it's mysterious, or it has a good atmosphere. And it explains also why people just have favorite places. They don't have really a feeling. It's like they cannot have the vocabulary to express why they feel it. So these feelings, they're very organic and instinctive. And the idea was then to put them into this very rational planning then. And it helped me also to define the sense of belonging. So I think these are linked to space. But there's the good society. Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a post-growth perspective, so I'm quite normative about it. Yeah, people can meet their needs without over-relying on growth, consumption, commodification of spaces. And I think there is something specific about rural areas because you have like the local, like residents of rural areas, they move much less. Like the residential mobility is much lower. The people are older. We're talking in a European context now. And so it does not mean that the social relations are deeper or something, but they expand themselves over a much longer duration of time. This could be possible entry point for post-growth planning. The people are more linked to their environment.
If we now look a bit again at your methods experiences, what are the specific strengths of different methods then also in rural areas, or do rural areas then provide unique advantages, limitations for doing empirical research and post-growth in the ways that you've done, walking interviews, arts-based research?
I never did research in an urban setting, so I cannot really compare it. But what I feel, because I've been working in many different rural small-scale municipalities, like you have like what I said before, like the distances to public services or even to the state is much longer. Like culture, healthcare, everything becomes a journey in a way. But then you have like it's kind of counterbalanced with the distances between local people across ages and professions. Like I think in urban settings, like these cross relations exist much less. And here people refer you to people who are much younger, like they spend time, like these intergenerational aspects are different. At the same time, also, like you need to explain degrowth maybe more than to your usual peer group bubble in an urban setting. And it was a joke when I talked about decreixement in Catalan degrowth. And some people said, yeah, but we here, like, we need jobs, like we need jobs, we need more services, we don't need degrowth. So you also need to value that, you need to integrate that and not romanticize it. And what I like, I mean, about these small cities, what is interesting for urban planning maybe, or post-growth planning is that you have a theoretically high leverage what municipalities can do. Like we have in France, we have the law Zero Artificialization Net, which forbids new buildings if there is vacancy in the village center. Or in another municipality I worked, it was an alpine municipality. The mayor was planning to cancel artificial snow, like forbid artificial snow for the very vibrant tourism industry here. So it would have meant to change the entire tourism strategy of the village. So the room of action is much faster and more directly. On the other side, also, like you have the rural municipalities, they run on a deficit. They're confronted with a very heavy administration, with people who are not that experienced with it. And they have a lot of obligations towards the state. So you can, like, small changes can happen very fast at this local scale, but the bigger changes, like the more systemic changes, become very difficult. So I'm a friend of bioregions, like
Yes.
would be my idea.
So we now went through research for a couple of minutes, methods and so forth. Are there specific requirements for research that we should take more seriously for researching degrowth, post-growth, especially from the context that you've been studying?
Like, I think what I also hear very often that conviviality, solidarity, care, they're explicitly framed as degrowth values these days. From experiences from a master thesis I supervised, they're not, I think some of these values are actually quite universal. Like also like right-wing or conservative politicians, they are very much for solidarity, for a specific group, conviviality. So I think there is a communication gap sometimes. That's for degrowth research is also a way how to instrumentalize, in a very ugly term now, but how to operationalize these values. And I do think it's important, like, to take as many diverse people as possible into this research. Right? And with effect theory, I think it's working.
You told me before that you're currently, now in April 2026, working with a new project using Bruno Latour's actor network theory for local planning practice, if I'm correct. What is on your agenda then for the coming month in this?
Yeah, this is, for example, one example where a municipality has a very high leverage. It's the local municipality with a population of 200 people. And they want to integrate non-human actors into their water management. So for me, that means I continue to increase the diversity of my interview partners by including more than human actors into my research. More concretely, I observe and I will try to find indicators to evaluate what is the role of these art-based processes in rural water management. And I'm not an artist myself, but I do think like these approaches can really unlock these effects and subconscious perception, as I said a couple of years ago. So,
yeah, if I may ask, how did they come to think about non-human actors, especially for a small kind of more remote municipality?
The drought. There was a drought, and so they had a lot of it's a very agricultural area. And the French government issued some statements on water restriction, what is limited and what is to restrict water consumption during the day. And it turned out that local gardens were not considered as agriculture, but as leisure. And so they were not allowed to water their gardens, and which a lot of people feel a very strong sense of belonging to these gardens. And so they try to think water management now differently.
Cool. So I'm already much looking forward to listening, reading, getting insights into what happens when engaging deeper with 200 people. So it means you can really get in-depth insights, experiences, stories, especially if you do work together with artists.
I'm very curious, honestly. Like, I'm quite excited about it.
So that we are already moving to the very end of this podcast interview. Maybe we talk again about the experiences that you will gather then in this new episode of Your Research Live. But as a final line for this episode, I would like you to ask to finish the sentence post-growth planning is for me and for our listeners.
Okay, I wrote it down before. Post-growth planning for me, has to build up on already existing social and physical infrastructures and relations, because we cannot go back the way we came from.
Many thanks, Julia, and many regards from here to Barcelona.
Many thanks. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.